Hi everyone, welcome back to DGMZ, Diwan-e-Ghalib, Meri Subani. To all our returning viewers, we are very happy you could join us again. And to the new viewers, we are delighted you discovered the podcast and decided to tune in for the first time. Now, if you were with me in the previous episode, you know that currently we are going through Ghazal 34 from Diwan-e-Ghalib, Yak-Zarra-e-Zamiin nahin Be-Kaar. We've already covered 3 couplets. Today we are going to pick up the 4th couplet. As always, I'm going to read the couplet first and then we will get into an approximate translation, keywords, key concepts, and finally the DGMZ impression of the couplet. So, allow me to read to you couplet 4 from Ghazal 34 from Diwan-e-Ghalib. Taaza nahin hai, Nashaa-e-Fikr-e-Sukhan Mujhe. ताज़ा नहीं है नशाए-फ़िक्र-ए-सुख़न मुझे, तिर्याकी-ए-क़दीम हूँ दूद-ए-चराग़ का. Let's begin with a quick approximate translation. So first line, ताज़ा नहीं है नशाए-फ़िक्र-ए-सुख़न मुझे. It's not new for me, this intoxication of deep thinking about poetry. Tiryaaki-e-Qadim हूँ दूद-ए-Charaagh का. I am a long-time opium addict of the smoke from the burning lamp. Now, let's start picking the keywords for the couplet. There are quite a few, so we will get into it promptly. First word, taza. A very common word. We use it in our day-to-day vocabulary. What it means is something fresh, something young, raw, tender, right? Usually सब्जी को describe करने के लिए बहुत इस्तेमाल होता है, as you would know. इस पर जावेद शेख का ये शेर, फिर कोई ताज़ा सुखन दिल में जगह करता है, जब भी लगता है कि लिखने को बचा कुछ भी नहीं. Beautiful couplet. Approximate translation is, once again, a fresh poem makes its place, makes its way into my heart whenever I start thinking that there is nothing left to write. Next word, nasha. Nasha, again, a very common word, right? Basically, what it describes is intoxication, some kind of euphoria, right? इस पे खुमार बाराबंकी का ये शेर, हवा को बहुत सरकशी का नशा है, मगर ये ना भूले दिया भी दिया है. Lovely couplet. The approximate translation is, the wind has a very rebellious intoxication, right? Intoxication of a rebel, this wind. But it should not forget that the lamp is also, after all, a lamp. It will stand its ground. Beautiful couplet. Third word, fikr. So again, a common word, right? We use it in our day-to-day vocabulary. Fikr is worrying about something, being concerned about something, being worked up about something, right? इस पे अल्लामा इकबाल का ये शेर, खिरातमंदों से क्या पूछूं कि मेरी इब्तिदा क्या है. खिरतमंदों से क्या पूछूं कि मेरी इब्तिदा क्या है, कि मैं इस फिक्र में रहता हूँ मेरी इंतहा क्या है. Great, very nice couplet. So the approximate translation is, what do I go and ask these wise ones, these intelligent ones, these intellectuals about what is my start? Where is my start? Where is my beginning point? Because I am too busy being concerned about or worrying about what is my limit, what is my extreme limit. So yeah, I don't go and waste my time asking these wise people where my start was. I am too busy worrying where my extreme limit will be. All right, moving on to the next word, sukhan. Beautiful word, and we will get into its depths later in the impression. But what it translates to is some kind of language, some kind of speech, some kind of conversation, right? A dialogue, words. इस पे अल्लामा इकबाल का शेर, निगाह बुलंद सुखन दिल नवाज जां पुरसोस, निगाह बुलंद सुखन दिल नवाज जां पुरसोस, यही है रखते सफ़र मीरे कारवां के लिए. The approximate translation is a gaze that is high up there, right? Poetry that is soothing, gracious, calms the heart, and a life that is blazing, fiery, passionate, right? These are the bag and baggage of the leaders of the caravan. So when you lead a caravan, right, when you have a following that is walking in your steps, since you are leading them, these are your things. This is your bag, this is your baggage. A side which is set up real high, poetry, speech which is soothing to the heart, and life that is flaming, fiery and passionate. Beautiful couplet. All right, moving on to Tiryaki. I think we are encountering this word for the first time at DGMZ. Interesting word. What it means is an antidote of some kind, a remedy that can work against all sicknesses, all pains, all problems, health problems, right? That universal medicine is Tiryaki. But it is also it also has an additional meaning of an addict, specifically an opium addict. इस पे अल्लामा इकबाल का शेर, चमन में तल्ख नवाई मेरी गवारा कर कि जहर भी कभी करता है कारे तिरयाकी. So the approximate translation is, in this garden, please accept my saying the bitter truth, right? Exposing the bitter truth. Let me do that in this garden. Remember that sometimes even poison can serve as an antidote, can serve as a cure. So don't shun me when I say bitter truth. Allow me to say it. All right. Moving on to Qadim. Again, a word we are encountering at DGMZ for the first time. Qadim means something very ancient, very old, from the bygone eras, right? इस पे अमीर मिनाई का शेर, हमारा नाम भी लिख लो जो है कलम जारी, कदीम आपके खिदमत गुजार हम भी हैं. So the approximate translation is, please register my name also now that your pen has started to write, started to flow, because from a long time, right, from a long time we have been in your service, we have been loyal to you. Now, next word, dood. Dood means smoke, not to be confused with doodh, which is milk. This is dood, D-U-U-D. Smoke, some kind of steam, some kind of vapor, some kind of haze, some kind of mist, right? And sometimes metaphorically it will also be called the sigh, the lament, right? That one would emit in anguish and pain. So इस पर बहादुर शाह जफर का ये शेर, जिगर पर दाग, लब पर दूदे दिल और अश्क दामन में. जिगर पर दाग, लब पर दूदे दिल और अश्क दामन में, तेरी महफिल से हम मानिंदे शमा सुबदम निकले. What a lovely couplet, what a picturization. So the approximate translation is, bearing scars on our heart, bearing the smoke of our heart on our lips, and with a cloak full of tears, we exited your gathering in the early hours of the morning, personifying a burning candle itself. Just the parallelism between the candle and jigar par daag, lab par duud-e-Dil, or ashq daman mein. Beautiful picturization. All right, so that takes care of dood. Moving on to the last word, charaagh. Again, a common word. We use it in our local vocabulary. It is a lamp. Not to be confused with shama, which is candle. This is a lamp. Usually we'll use a fuel to burn, oil or melted liquid paraffin wax or something like that. इस पे वसीम बरेलवी का ये शेर, जहाँ रहेगा वहीं रोशनी लुटाएगा. Another good one of our favorites here at DGMZ. जहाँ रहेगा वहीं रोशनी लुटाएगा, किसी चराग का अपना मकान नहीं होता. Approximate translation is, wherever it is, that is where it is going to disperse its light, share its light, send out its light. The lamp does not have a home of its own. Wherever you keep it, it will start dispersing light there. That is home for it. Beautiful couplet. All right. So that takes care of all our key words. Let's start getting into our DGMZ impression. ताज़ा नहीं है नशाए-फिक्र-ए-सुखन मुझे. It's not new for me, this intoxication of deep thinking on poetry. Let's split the line and pick it up in pieces. So the first piece, ताज़ा नहीं है. It is an interesting start Ghalib has chosen for the couplet. ताज़ा नहीं है translates to it's not fresh, right? By extension, it's stale, right? In our day-to-day vocabulary, that's how taza is commonly used. Like I said, we usually use it with reference to grocery and vegetables and fruits, right? Taza hai ki nahi hai, you know. But the problem with this translation was that it was not passing the DGMZ test, right? Stale just did not make sense as a descriptor of Sukhan, which will come later in this first line. Because stale and Sukhan did not jive, right? Sukhan is poetry, so stale poetry with reference to Ghalib, just it wasn't making sense either generally or specifically to the couplet. So we researched further and found out that taza actually has additional meanings other than just fresh. And what are those additional meanings? Taza is used also to describe something new, something done for the first time, something very recent. And then of course the usual meaning that we are used to, which is fresh, tender, raw, green, right? Now, with these additional meanings of new, recent, done for the first time, we were finally able to understand the correct nuance of taza that Ghalib is using here, which is new or recent, even for the first time. It is not young or fresh. That's not what Ghalib means when he uses taza here. Ghalib in this first part of the first line is stating, I am not a newcomer. I am not a novice. I am not a first timer. This is not my first rodeo. By extension, I have done this many, many times. I am very accustomed to this. This is a long-held, age-old activity for me. Whatever that is, we will come to it. But taza nahin hai, this is what it means. So what exactly is Ghalib referring to when he says, I'm not a novice at it, I'm not a first timer at it? What is this it? Well, it is Nashaa-e-Fikr-e-Sukhan. Huge word complex. typical Ghalib word complex with 3 big and impactful words packed into it. To understand it, we'll have to unpack it word by word. So let's pick Nashaa first. Nasha, a word known to us since it is indeed part of our local vocabulary. It translates to intoxication, drunkenness, inebriation. We have catchy phrases like tipsy, sloshed, wasted, right? All in all, very high on something, euphoric about something, intoxicated on something. The beauty of the word nasha in this couplet lies both in the word and outside the word. Now, inside this word nasha is captured this elusive feeling of intoxication, euphoria, and exhilaration. Outside of this word nasha in the couplet is the masterful connection Ghalib creates between nasha and Taaza nahin hai. An intoxication, a euphoria that is not new, that is not for the first time, right? Ghalib's style of distinguishing between the intoxication which has happened many a times vis-a-vis an intoxication that is happening for the first time. Taaza nahin hai nasha. I am not new to this intoxication. This intoxication is not happening to me for the first time. By extension, this has happened to me in the past many, many times. This is not intoxication. This, in fact, is an addiction for me. Just the way of describing it, right? Very, very beautifully delineating between first time intoxication and addiction. मनीष पांडे का ये शेर, हमें सुखन की तलब रही है, हमें सुखन का नशा रहा है. The approximate translation is, I have always wanted, desired, needed poetry, and I have always been under the intoxication of poetry. So that takes care of nasha. Moving on to the second word of the word complex, fikr. Just like Taaza, we are used to a meaning of fikr in our common day-to-day vocabulary, which is concern, worry. Once again, the challenge with this meaning was that it was not passing the DGMZ test for us. Why would Ghalib have any kind of worry or concern about poetry? Of all the things, poetry. If there was one thing Ghalib had 100% confidence and faith in, was the fact that there were few to none poets that could match him. So, once again, we went ahead and did additional research on the word fikr. Allow us to share with you what we found. The word fikr originates from Arabic language and is derived from the triliteral root fakr, F-K-R, fakr. This root universally relates to core concepts of mental activity, intellect or reflection, contemplation, an opinion or a view, and then of course lastly concern and worry, which we are used to. The Persian language, it seems, borrowed this term directly from classical Arabic language, retaining its core meanings related to intellectual processes. Fakr root is used in various verb forms in Arabic to describe nuances of mental activity and thinking. Jaise fakara, which means to think, to consider something in a general sense. Then fakkara, to reflect, meditate, ponder, muse, speculate. Then tafakkara, think something over for oneself, to contemplate intensely. And then lastly, iftakara, to remember, recall or recollect something. So this was a very interesting insight that helped us understand how Ghalib is using fikr in today's couplet, because we know Ghalib was a pro at Persian language. He borrowed a lot of words from Persian language, and Persian language did a lot of borrowing from Arabic language. So when you trace the roots, you start understanding, oh, so fikr actually at its root is all about mental activity, thinking, contemplation, pondering, ideas, right? Yes, it does have one meaning for concern or worry, but that's not its core meaning. All these forms of fakr root depend on the intended nuance of the mental activity. But no matter what version of fakr you use, it will always be strongly embedded in some kind of thinking, some kind of pondering. Now, in addition to this linguistic, legacy of how the word came to be in Persian and Urdu language, the meaning of fikr in Islam is also very deep. Fikr or tafakkur is a highly recommended form of worship and a crucial means of receiving guidance and deepening one's faith. It involves deep contemplation, reflection, and use of intellect to ponder the signs of Allah in the universe, within oneself and in the Quran. The relevance of fikr is foundational to a conscious and meaningful practice of Islam. The Quran indicates that fikr, which is thinking, and aql, which is reasoning, are necessary for receiving divine guidance. Fikr is described as the lamp of the heart, illuminating one's inner sight and enabling a person to perceive spiritual realities, truth from falsehood, and the temporary nature of the world versus the permanence of the hereafter. Without fikr, the heart is considered to be in darkness. In essence, fikr is a dynamic and essential part of a Muslim's life, preventing a superficial understanding of faith and leading to a deeper, more conscious and purposeful existence. So that is Islam. Now, in spiritual traditions like Sufism, fikr and dhikr are considered complementary, like two wings of a bird. Fikr is the light of the intellect and analyzes, observes everything. Dhikr, on the other hand, is the light of the heart that remembers and feels God's presence. So, now with that background, fikr completely flips on its head, right? The way it would come across on the first reading is not how it was intended. Here, when Ghalib says Nashaa-e-Fikr, he is talking about this intense, deep mental activity of thinking, visualizing, pondering, meditating, right? So just keep that in mind as we move forward to the third word in this word complex, Sukhan, the heart of the couplet, right? The heart of Urdu poetry. So Sukhan is again a Persian term. It means any kind of speech, any kind of words, any kind of conversation. It also has an extended meaning which covers poetry. In Urdu poetry, however, Sukhan is a foundational and highly significant term, embodying the essence of eloquent expression and poetic craftsmanship. Sukhan is used in compound words to describe poetic ability and eloquence, and is considered hallmark of a masterful poet. Sukhan often refers to poetry as a whole, collection of poetry might be titled with the word Sukhan in it. Also, events that celebrate Urdu literature can be titled as Mehfil-e-Sukhan or Bazm-e-Sukhan. Other usages of this word in the poetry circle, especially Urdu poetry circle, are Sukhanvar, which means an eloquent person or an eloquent poet. Sukhan-go, which means a speaker or an orator. But of all these usages, one of the biggest honorable usage of Sukhan is as a title of honor. When it is given to you as a title of honor. And one of the best examples of that is Mir Taqi Mir, one of the pioneers and most revered figures in Urdu poetry, on whom was bestowed the title Khanda-haa-e-Sukhan, God of Poetry. What a title, right? Khanda-haa-e-Sukhan, God of Poetry. This title signified that Mir Taqi Mir was a master of the craft and demonstrated the full hidden beauty of Urdu language through his words. Sukhan is the very soul of Urdu poetry, the vehicle through which poets express profound emotions, showcase their linguistic mastery, and connect with audiences across generations and cultures. Now, with background into all those three words that are part of that word complex, let's revisit Nashaa-e-Fikr-e-Sukhan. Ghalib has indeed created a mix, a heady, intoxicating mix of meaning and emotion in Nashaa-e-Fikr-e-Sukhan that is absolutely addictive for poetry lovers, both who write poetry and the ones who read poetry. Ghalib in this word complex describes the intoxication and euphoria that a master poet like him creates and experiences as he goes into deep reflection, deep meditation and pondering on his emotions, on his words, and the expression of both in his poetry. Ghalib finally ends the first line with Mujhe, which means to me. So, the DGMZ impression of this first line, Taaza nahin Nashaa-e-Fikr-e-Sukhan Mujhe, is Ghalib is stating, it's not new, it's not a first time experience for me. This intoxication and euphoria of deep thinking and pondering about poetic thoughts, poetic words, poetic themes, and crafting exquisite poetry from it, it's not the first time I'm doing it. This intoxication is not the first time that it's happening to me. ज़ेब गौरी का बहुत प्यारा शेर, मौजूए सुखन हिम्मत आली ही रहेगी, जो तर्ज निकालूंगा मिसाली ही रहेगी. The approximate translation is, the theme of my poetry, the essence of my poetry will always have a very high level of courage, power, strength, and whatever style of poetry I will adopt will always create an exemplary example, will always be something people will look up to as an ideal. So that is the drive in a poet, right? To write poetry which is not short on courage, and to write poetry which creates an exemplary example for everyone. People should look up to it. All right. So that takes care of Taaza nahin Nashaa-e-Fikr-e-Sukhan Mujhe. Moving on to our second line. Tiryaaki-e-Qadim hu Duud-e-Charaagh ka. I am a long time opium addict of the smoke from the burning lamp. If the first line was all about meanings, the second line is all about visualization. But before we get into the visualization, let's get the words out of the way. Tiryaki. Tiryaki, the root term is tiryak, which means a universal remedy, a universal antidote for all poisons, all illnesses, especially snake bite back in that time. But in Urdu, tiryaki means an addict, specifically an opium addict. Opium in the olden days was actually an antidote for anxiety and various other ailments, and hence eating opium used to be referred to as tiryaki, because you were taking opium to cure anxiety and other ailments. But as we all know, opium is an addictive substance also. So in Urdu, that tiryaki evolved from eating opium as an antidote to eating opium as an addiction. So tiryaki in Urdu poetry has a wider range of meaning, which is opium eater. Next is Qadim in second line. Qadim is a beautiful word. It means something very ancient, something very old, very rich, right? In culture, in heritage, in its value, because it is so time-tested and old. Therefore, Tiryaaki-e-Qadim would be an addict from old times, addict from bygone eras, or simply put, an addict over a long period of time. Not a recent addict. Taaza nahin, right? Not a recent addict. An addict over a long period of time. And then Ghalib says, who, right? I am. So I am an opium addict over a long period of time. Therefore, Ghalib in this first part of the second line states, I am a long-time opium addict. Tiryaaki-e-Qadim hu. Now, let's move to the second part of the second line. Duud-e-Charaagh ka. Dood is smoke, Charaagh is a burning oil lamp, therefore smoke from a burning oil lamp. Tiryaaki-e-Qadim hu Dood-e-Charaagh ka. I am a long time opium addict of the smoke coming from the burning lamp. Now what is this? An opium addict of the smoke coming from a burning lamp. अब ये क्या माजरा है? Like we told you, the second line is all about visualization. And to enjoy that visualization, we need to do a visual comparison of Tiryaaki-e-Qadim and Dood-e-Charaagh. First up, Tiryaaki-e-Qadim. Just to set some background context, which will be very necessary to understand this. So, in ancient times, opium addicts would use opium pipes to smoke opium. These pipes were designed for the evaporation and subsequent inhalation of opium. True opium pipes allowed for the opiate to be vaporized while being heated over a special oil lamp known as an opium lamp. This manner of smoking opium vaporized opium instead of burning it. Because of its design, the opium pipe needed an opium lamp in order to function. The lamp was as highly specialized as the pipe and used to channel precise amount of heat needed to vaporize the bit of opium placed in a pipe and held over the lamp. Sometimes known as a cage lamp, this opium lamp was designed to be portable and featured an outer cage which protected the glass shade while traveling. The chain atop the cage of the lamp allowed a traveler to hang the lamp from the ceiling of a cart or a ship, where it could also be used as a small light source. Beginning in the 18th century, smoking opium recreationally became an entire culture in itself, replete with beautifully crafted paraphernalia that expressed one's good taste and refinement. Opium use became as central to social life as taking tea or smoking tobacco, rich with its own customs, traditions, and exquisitely crafted paraphernalia. Each step of the smoking process called for a different accessory, each an opportunity to impress. In the early 20th century, opium pipes were often called dream sticks. This is where the famous phrase pipe dreams, which you must have heard, originates from, which is a metaphorical reference to an unattainable or fanciful hope or dream. Due to opium eradication campaigns in the 19th and early 20th centuries, antique opium pipes from then are now extremely rare. This method of smoking opium was indeed very vivid and very specific, and not at all similar to the other methods of smoking that we are familiar with, whether it is tobacco or anything else. This elaborate, very convoluted, complex method of smoking opium was very unique to opium. Smoking opium was developed as an art form back in the 17th and 18th century, and it is clear that there were two very visually alive and engaging components of this opium smoking paraphernalia. Number one, the burning opium lamp, and number two, the vapors it created from opium because of vaporization. So that is the visual behind Tiryaaki-e-Qadim. Not easy to understand if you just go with the meaning opium addict. You have to get into this entire elaborate way of smoking opium, and that is when the visual starts emerging. Let's move on to the second visual in the second line, Duud-e-Charaagh. Now, this is not as complex as Tiryaaki-e-Qadim. We are very familiar with Duud-e-Charaagh. We are very familiar with this visual of an oil lamp burning with a smoky flame. Once again, this visual also has two very alive and engaging components. One is the burning oil lamp, and the other is the smoky flame created from combustion of the oil in the wick. Ghalib in the second line states that I am a long-time opium addict who is addicted to the smokes from the flame of the burning oil lamp. Tiryaaki-e-Qadim hoon, Duud-e-Charaagh ka. And now, for those who know how opium is smoked, a vivid picture emerges where Ghalib is an opium addict, but not to the vapors from opium, but to the smoke from his own burning oil lamp. This was Ghalib's way of painting a picture for us. In this picture, we can see Ghalib burning the midnight oil, literally, no pun intended, where Ghalib sat long nights, night after night, bent over his burning oil lamp, inhaling the smoke that is coming from its flame again and again as he pondered and penned exquisite poetry. Ghalib equates the poet in him to the opium addict. This opium addict has his opium, Ghalib has his poetry. This opium addict has his opium lamp, Ghalib has his oil lamp. Finally, this opium addict has his vapors of opium that intoxicate him. And Ghalib the poet has the smoke from his oil lamp that intoxicates him. So that is the parallel Ghalib very vividly is drawing in this second line. An opium addict with all his paraphernalia, and Ghalib the poet with all his paraphernalia, both of them equally intoxicated. So, that takes care of the second line, Tiryaaki-e-Qadim hu, Duud-e-Charaagh ka. I am a long-time opium addict of the smoke from the burning lamp. Now, as always, let's take a step back and look at the couplet in totality. The couplet is an extravaganza, where we see Ghalib once again paint a canvas so huge, so vivid, that it will never leave your mind. And he chooses a parallelism so unique that once you finally understand it, it will never leave your mind. Once again, Ghalib proves he is a great poet who, number one, exquisitely weaves words to create beautiful meanings. Number two, exquisitely weaves words to create beautiful pictures. Contrary to the usual way of describing poetry, which would be, well, poetry is a talent, poetry is an art form, poetry is a skill, Ghalib in today's couplet chooses to describe poetry as an intoxication, a euphoria, an exhilaration, a feeling that transcends you from reality into another dimension. He does not shy away or hesitate to draw a beautiful comparison between the addiction of the poet with the addiction of an opium addict. No hesitation. No hesitation at all. Now, another very interesting, very masterful stroke in this couplet is how Taaza and Qadim are fabulously leveraged by Ghalib to distinguish between a novice and a maestro. Ghalib uses both words to drive home the point that he is no startup poet who has enjoyed the intoxication of writing good poetry for the first time. This intoxication is not new to Ghalib. This is not the first time for Ghalib. Taaza nahin hai nasha. Ghalib in fact states that I am a pro at this. I am a long time addict. Tiryaaki-e-Qadim hu. And then Abhishek Shukla ka ye sher. Ye ख्वाबगाह, ये आँखें, ये मेरा इश्क-ए-क़दीम, हर एक चीज़ मेरी ज़ात में पुरानी है. The power of old, right? The power of a pro. So the approximate translation is this ख्वाबगाह, this sleeping chamber, this bedroom of mine, these eyes of mine, this age-old love of mine, everything in my existence is old. Everything is old. Lastly, in DGMZ's opinion, this is one of the trickiest shares from Ghalib that we have encountered so far. It is as if at every step of the way, every word of the way, Ghalib is trying to trick his audience into interpreting the couplet incorrectly, as if Ghalib is testing his audience. Taaza nahin hai can be so easily misinterpreted as stale or basi hai, right? Fikr, again, so easily can be misinterpreted as worry and concern. Tiryaaki-e-Qadim, again, can be easily misinterpreted as long-standing antidote. It is almost like a minefield. Any wrong step you take, you lose the meaning of the couplet, the entire meaning of the couplet, the entire visualization of the couplet, and you would not even know that you are taking a wrong step because all these words have alternative, commonly used meanings. Lastly, one trick, one minefield, which is not very evident, but we think it is hidden in the first line, is the way Ghalib uses Taaza nahin hai and Sukhan in the same line. If you were to skim over it quickly, you could misinterpret it as stale poetry. Taaza nahin hai sukhan. Right? But we all know this is not what Ghalib meant. Right? So, wo bhi ek trick hai. Taaza nahin hai and sukhan should never exist together. You are not worth your weight in dust as a poet if your sukhan is not fresh, new. Right? So taza sukhan हमेशा ताज़ा ही होना चाहिए. But the way Ghalib writes it, if you skim through it quickly, you almost for a moment might think that he's saying ताज़ा नहीं है sukhan. In all honesty, today DGMZ felt like an Australian batsman facing Ghalib, the Douglas Jardine, playing bodyline with us for the Ashes Cup. For those who know the reference, know the reference. It was a tricky couplet. But that brings us to the end of the impression for Taaza nahin hai, Nashaa-e-Fikr-e-Sukhan Mujhe, Tiryaaki-e-Qadim hoon, Duud-e-Charaagh ka. I hope you enjoyed the impression. As always, we'll be very keen to hear back from you, your comments, your feedback. For all the new viewers, a very strong recommendation. Please access the episode titled Introduction to DGMZ, because that will give you a good insight into the motivation and inspiration behind this podcast. For our regular viewers, whenever you have time, please visit the homepage of the channel. It has various playlists segregated by topic, segregated by ghazals. Surf through them and pick an episode that interests you. Now, allow me to go ahead and close this episode by sending a lot of love and light to all you dear viewers, and thanks for watching.